Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. In this video we are going to be looking at the 2022 Senate elections and who I think will have control of the Senate in January of 2023. These elections are going to be very important to look at from even a year ahead now in July of 2021 because they're going to have a huge impact on what President Biden can do in the second half of his term. So the Democrats are likely going to have control of the U.S. Senate until 2023 at the very least. Things could happen, someone could resign or pass away, but 99% chance Democrats hold control of the Senate until 2023. And the midterm elections are going to be very interesting with redistricting affecting the congressional lines in the House and the Senate being, there being a lot of key races that we need to talk about. So we're going to hop right into it and take a look at the 2022 Senate elections and who I think is going to win each in every state. So we're going to start off with the safe states: Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, New York, the state of Vermont, and Connecticut. I believe that is it. 45 safe seats. For the GOP, they have the states of Utah, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri. Iowa, we got some news from that today. We'll talk about that in a second. Indiana, and the state of South Carolina. So the Republicans have more safe seats than the Democrats, since the Democrats have an advantage when they're starting off with 45 seats for the Democratic Party, 44 for the GOP. So, like I said, there are a couple states you could debate either way. For the Democrats, Rick Scott said that he was the, and I believe the NRSC chair, said that, he thinks his party can flip Illinois and Connecticut under the right circumstances. He does not believe that. Those are partisan. I don't want to say lies because that seems like an allegation, but he's saying that to rally the base. And Democrats do the same thing where they say they can win Kentucky and South Carolina. These states are all very safe for each party. There's a scenario where Connecticut or Illinois could fall below the 12% threshold that I believe to be safe, but they're not flipping, realistically speaking. Now, Iowa, I said we got some news out of Iowa today. So I'm filming this on the 21st. I'm going to release it, I believe, the 23rd. And Chuck Grassley is, I think, 90% running for re-election. He could always not run for re-election, but I think he's going to run. And the Democrats are likely going to be running Abby Finkenauer. So Finkenauer was a former Democrat in the House, and, she lost re-election surprisingly in 2020. I had her race. I remember I had it as lean Democrat, and I said it could easily be likely. But that was just when she lost to Ashley Hinson. That came as a surprise to me and many people. She was, I think, every race, every predictor had her at lean or likely Democrat. She was not supposed to lose that race. She lost that race. She did run ahead of Joe Biden, but she did still lose that race, and she's now running for Senate, and I think that's a very, very bad idea for her because Chuck Grassley's a popular incumbent, and Iowa's a pretty red state now. 12 years ago, if she was in 2008, she would have won a Senate race. Now Iowa's a state that's shifting really far away from the Democrats, and she's going to lose by, I think, at least 20%. I'd say she's going to lose by 25%, which, you might say, well, Joe Biden only lost the state by 7 or 8 in 2020. Well, Chuck Grassley's a very popular incumbent in 2016. Trump won the state by 9. He won nearly every single county. I think he won every county except for Johnson County, and I do think that he actually won with, I think he won something like 65 to 35 or something like that. So he did win very big in 2016, and he's going to win big again. And even if Chuck Grassley does retire and does not run again, it would go down to likely, but Abby Finkenauer would not really have a chance of flipping it. And I do not think she'd be running if her seat was still in the House. So, yeah. Now, that being said, I think it's important we move on to our likely Democrat states. So, Colorado is the first that comes to mind, and I think it's really the only state that I think I'm going to say is likely. So, Colorado is a very interesting state politically because, there's a lot of room for Republicans to improve, and there's a lot of room for Democrats to improve. I'm not saying that it's realistically going to flip, but I am going to say that Colorado is an elastic state. So the population of Colorado, it's very centered around Denver. So obviously Democrats do very well in Denver, but the Republicans, if they start to improve in the Denver suburbs, like if they start getting 2014 or 2010 numbers out of the Denver suburbs, Colorado gets a lot more competitive. And that would be good for the GOP. It's not likely that happens, though, so I think it's likely, but, we could talk more about Colorado because they did release their, proposed House map that would be essentially a 5-3 delegation in favor of the Democrats, and, Michael Bennet running for re-election. That could be an interesting race to watch. For now, it's not competitive, in my opinion. I think it's going to be 10 points for Bennet, but that could change. Now, I think that's it for the likely Democrat states. For the likely Republican states, Alaska is the first thing that comes to mind. So Alaska is a really, really weird situation, and I'm not going to act like I don't know, like I'm kind of totally understanding what's going on there. So what's going on in Alaska is that we are essentially we might see a three-way race between Kelly Tshibaka, Lisa Murkowski, the Republican incumbent, and Al Gross, or whoever Democrat runs. For the sake of this video, we'll be saying Al Gross is running. So Tshibaka and Murkowski are both basically running for the GOP primary, and Tshibaka is a candidate that is very right wing. She is endorsed by Donald Trump, and she is endorsed by the Alaska Republican Party. Now, Lisa Murkowski is a more moderate Republican. She's actually the most moderate Republican in the Senate, in my opinion. She is the only Republican recently voted for some Democratic bills. I believe she's the only Republican to actually support LGBTQ rights. Susan Collins has been kind of flip-floppy on it, but Murkowski's definitely the most socially liberal Republican in the Senate, and she has voted with Democrats in the past. She voted with them on in 2017 the GOP tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Lisa Murkowski voted against that, and the Republicans only lost that vote by 1. So if Murkowski voted with Mitch McConnell, she would, we would not have Obamacare today. So Murkowski is a very moderate Republican. She's a swing vote in the Senate, and she is quite an interesting figure, both politically and, she comes from a political family. But this is not a Lisa Murkowski stand video. This is a video talking about her race, and she's in a tough spot because she has appealed to some moderate Democrats and some moderate Republicans, but she's not popular right now. She is not popular with Democrats because she is still a Republican. She's more popular with Democrats than Donald Trump, but she's not too popular with them no matter what. She is also not popular with Republicans because she is a very liberal Republican, and Donald Trump does not support her, and Donald Trump has a foothold on the GOP. So that does not bode well for her. And in 2016, she ran a really interesting race where she ran as the Republican candidate against another Republican, Joe Miller, I believe, and she won with she has never won a race with more than 50% of the vote. In 2004, she won with 48%. In 2010, she won with 40% as a write-in candidate, which was a whole other hot mess we should talk about later. But in 2016, she won that race as a Republican running in a 5-way race. And Alaska politics is weird, but Lisa Murkowski makes things 10 times more complicated because she sometimes loses the primary and then has to run on her own, or she runs on she runs as the Republican nominee and does not receive too much support from the GOP, and she wins as a result of Democrats splitting votes or whatever. So that is not good for her. Now, on the other hand, her saving grace could be ranked choice voting, because if we see a race between Toshiba, or a right-wing Republican, Murkowski kind of is the centrist in the race, and then Al Gross as the Democrat, that could help her out if she finishes in the top 2. Now, if she finishes third, then she's done. If she finishes in the top 2, she'd go in a runoff with whoever, Toshiba or Gross. She would definitely get support from, Al Gross's voters, who'd rank her second because she's more liberal than Kelly Toshiba. And Kelly Toshiba voters could also rank her second behind Gross because Gross is more liberal than Murkowski, and they'd rather have Gross be in the Senate, or Murkowski be in the Senate than Al Gross. So that's my long way of saying that Alaska is a hot mess right now, and we do not know where it's going to go. But I think likely Republican is a suitable rating, but that could change because, who knows where we'll be in a year from now, because, we could see crazy stuff happening in Alaska. So I spent way too much time talking about Alaska. I will compensate by giving short remarks on Ohio, because Ohio is a race that I don't care about particularly. I think Ohio is a state that's trending away from Democrats. I think, Tim Ryan's a good candidate for the Democrats. He comes from a working-class district. He won by, I think, 4 or 5 last November, so it is a competitive seat. But it is still a seat that is not going to carry him all across Ohio. I think he's going to do a little better than Joe Biden, don't get me wrong. The Republican primary in Ohio is a hot mess right now between J.D. Vance, James Timken, and Josh Mandel. And I don't really know who's going to win that primary. I'd lead towards Mandel, but we really do not know. But I still think that no matter who wins that primary, barring a scandal, this race is likely Republican. I think Ryan loses by at least 6. So Florida's an interesting race. Now, originally I said Florida was safe. Well, I mean, basically safe. I said Marco Rubio's not losing. He has a higher chance of winning by 12 than he does of losing. Since then, I think my views have changed. Not really anything Rubio's done in particular, but I do think that Marco Rubio is someone who is not as good of a candidate as I think we think he is. So in 2010, he won an easy election because the Democrats essentially ran two candidates. In 2016, he won by 9 because he had a really good year that year, and he did very well with Hispanics. And Donald Trump on the ballot helped him in rural areas. He does not have that luxury with Trump not on the ballot, and I think that he's going to do a little worse in 2022 than he did in 2016 in rural areas. Now, that being said, it's not going to cost him anything because he's great with Hispanics in the South. He could very well win Miami-Dade County. I think he's going to lose it by 3 or 4, but he could very well win it, and he could very well, make Broward or Palm Beach below 15, which would be huge for Republicans. So he can do very well in South Florida. He can do very well in the suburbs. Whether it be Pinellas County, Seminole County, Jefferson County, Duval County, St. Lucie County is another one, but not as much. He can do very well in those areas, and I think he's gonna win by double the amount as Trump. So Trump won by 3.3. I think Rubio wins by 5 or 6. And solid showing for Rubio. He could win. People say he's gonna win by 10. I don't think that's likely because people act like Florida's safe Republican. Trump only won the state by 3. Florida was closer than Texas. Florida was closer than Minnesota. Florida was basically as close as Pennsylvania or Michigan. So Florida's still competitive by all means. It's just the Rubio's a strong incumbent, and the GOP is going to have a good year there in 2022. So we could easily, by the way, we could easily see the Democrats coming within 5 in Florida. I would not be surprised at all if Marco Rubio only wins by 2. And people would act like, how do you only win by 2? I'll say it's Florida. It's still a swing state. And I think that, people act like it's safe. I think it's on the lower end of likely. So, yeah. Now, for our lean Democrat states, I think that Nevada and Arizona are 2 very good lean states. I've never really moved them out of the lean column because, these are states that the Republicans should absolutely be at least toss-ups in, but they're running bad campaigns. So in Nevada, the Democrats have done a very good job of getting good turnout from Clark County and from Washoe County that benefits them. And they're going to do that again in 2022 in all likelihood. And the Republicans, their favorite candidate for Senate is Adam Laxalt, who lost the governor's race by 4% in 2018. That was a blue wave year, but Nevada's very inelastic. Even in red waves, like in 2014, there wasn't a Senate race there actually. But in 2014, the House elections in the state as a whole were not terrible for Democrats. I think they lost the popular vote in Nevada by 1%. And Nevada, over the past 10 years, the Republicans have only won 2 statewide elections, and those were 2 fluke governor races where the Democrats literally said they weren't going to try in them. And, they've won a couple random attorney general races, but they haven't won Senate races because of Harry Reid and Catherine Cortez Masto, Jackie Rosen. And Nevada's been very inelastic, and it's essentially stayed as a lean D state for this whole decade. Harry Reid was supposed to lose in 2010. He won by, I believe, 3%. In 2016, Donald Trump was according to the polls, supposed to win Nevada. He lost it by 2.4%. The Republicans were supposed to win that Senate race in 2016. They lost it. In 2018, they lost another Senate race. They lost the governor's race. In 2020, Donald Trump really tried to win Nevada. He lost it by 2.4% again. So the state has stayed the same, and I think the argument that Adam Laxalt is a good candidate because the national popular vote in 2018 was D plus 9, Nevada was only D plus 4, is a silly argument. And I do believe that he's going to lose again because Nevada voters in general aren't going to elect a candidate they rejected a couple of years before. I don't care if Adam Laxalt runs a good campaign. He's running against a popular Democratic incumbent that is not likely to turn off a ton of voters, so swing voters are not going to lean towards Laxalt as of right now. Could that change? Sure. But right now, I do not think there's a reasonable argument for telling me that Adam Laxalt is favored in this race. So I think that lean D is the good rating for Nevada. Now, over to Arizona. This is another state that I do expect Mark Kelly to win. And I do think that the Democrats are going to have another good hold here. The Republicans, I think, are going to target Arizona a little more than Nevada, but they have a brutal primary going on between Matt Salmon and Mark Brnovich. Brnovich is a more moderate Republican. He's still a Republican, but he's still moderate. And Salmon is a much more, Salmon's running in the governor's race. Oops, my bad. Brnovich is essentially favored in the Republican primary, but I guarantee you that Trump's going to try to, Donald Trump going to try to recruit at least one other Republican to run against him, because Trump and Brnovich have beef. Brnovich did not overturn, as the Secretary of State of Arizona, did not overturn the 2020 election in Arizona, even though it was only decided by 11,000 votes. So him and Trump do not have a great relationship. I mean, I'm sure that Trump would have him over Mark Kelly, but this is still someone that Donald Trump does not get along great with. So Arizona, the Republican Party of Arizona has been a mess for a while now, and I think that they're kind of imploding at this point. They don't have a candidate who can appeal to both the suburbs and the rural areas. So Brnovich might do a little better than Trump in the suburbs in Maricopa, but he's going to do a lot worse. And Kelly's still popular in the suburbs no matter what. Kelly's the most popular statewide person in Arizona right now, and I think that for that, he's likely going to win re-election by I think a little more than 2020. In 2020, it was I said Kelly was going to win by 5 or 6. He won by 2.4. And it's closer than people thought, I think, because Trump did so well in rural areas and he elevated Martha McSally for that reason. So I do think realistically that Arizona is going to be a state that Mark Kelly wins by, maybe 3, a little more than 2020. Now, going over to the state of Georgia, this is a state that has tilt D for a while, moved it to lean D, because I think that Raphael Warnock is just going to do well enough in the Atlanta suburbs to keep the state above 2%. I think he's going to win by 3. He won by 2 in the runoff. I think he wins by 3 because midterms are higher turnout than runoffs. The runoffs were they were very good for Democrats, but these were still races that the Republican Party, I guess, they had these races to lose and they lost them because they, had people on their side saying not to vote because it's rigged, that kind of thing, and for that reason, I think that's going to cost them again in 2022. And I do think that Georgia's going to stay in Democratic hands. Raphael Warnock, pretty strong incumbent. He can do very well with black voters in Atlanta, especially someone like Stacey Abrams on the ballot as the governor nominee. So I think Georgia stays blue for now. And yeah, so 49 seats the Democrats when you get past the leans. For the GOP, we also have some lean states. I think actually only one. North Carolina, I'm moving from Till R to Lean R. Jeff Jackson was originally the Democratic candidate. He imploded. He did not raise money, so it looks like Sherry Beasley is going to be the Democratic candidate. She's actually a pretty good candidate. She did lose the statewide election in 2020, but she ran ahead of Joe Biden and Kyle Cunningham. So, and she only lost by 300 votes, by the way. It was very close. She did not lose by a ton, and she has actually been elected statewide before, so she has that going for her. But she's still someone who I think is not, I guess, great she's not a star recruit. Roy Cooper would be a star recruit. Sherry Beasley, not necessarily, and I think that for that reason, I cannot have North Carolina as anything other than lean R. Could move to toss-up depending on the polling we see, but I do think that Sherry Beasley is going to lose this race by around 2. It'll be on the lower end of lean for sure, and I don't think anything's really changed. I just think that Tilt was a little too generous to the Democrats. I think lean is the better rating for now. Now, for our Tilt Democratic states, Pennsylvania is what comes to mind here. So Pennsylvania, John Fetterman is going to be the Democratic candidate, in my opinion. It could be Val Arkush, could be Malcolm Kenyatta, but not likely. And I do think that Fetterman is going to be the Democratic candidate here for a couple of reasons. He has that progressive support that, a lot of other Democrats don't, and that's going to help him, I think, with, a lot of union voters in Pennsylvania. They're not necessarily progressive, but they are populist, which Fetterman is, and I think he can also do well in the Philly area. The suburbs could shift a little to the right depending on how good of a campaign Fetterman runs. Joe Biden did very well in the Philly suburbs because he was from a Philly suburbs, granted. But, the GOP, we don't know who they're going to run. Right now, their favorite candidate is Sean Parnell, and Parnell's not great in the suburbs either. He lost a congressional race in 2020 in a Trump district, so he's not great. He can energize the rural parts of the state, so he has that going for him, but I think realistically speaking, he would not be favored. Could he win? Sure, we're talking about a state that Joe Biden only carried by a point, but I do think that John Fetterman is absolutely favored right now, so I think D plus 2, in my opinion. Very close to lean, but I'll put it as tilt to be cautious. This is a pickup, by the way, so first pickup. Now, the Republicans, to make this suspenseful, I'll give them New Hampshire first. The longtime viewers of the channel know that I've been very bullish on Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, but I'm moving his race down from lean R to tilt R. He might not even run, which is, like I said, if you talked to me in, January or February, I would have said Chris Sununu is 100% running, and the Democrats are losing this race for sure. Now I'm kind of, Sununu is probably going to run 60-40, he does, but still, he's not put himself in a great position, because he has said, he's governed as a conservative, he brands himself as a moderate, but he's, signed some restrictive abortion bills in a state that's very pro-choice, and he also is going to be put in a tough position by the Republicans who have control of the state legislature, drawing a gerrymandered map, and he might be forced to veto that map, which would potentially alienate the base that wants a gerrymandered map, or he would, say, okay, this is going to be the new map, and that would hurt him with moderates, because New Hampshire is a moderate state. It's full of small-town voters who, maybe voted for Trump in 2016, but then voted for Joe Biden in 2020. These are voters that are New Hampshire's a swingy state, and that's what makes it so interesting. We saw Trump only lost it by a point in 2016, then he lost it by 7 in 2020, all while a Republican governor won re-election by 33%. So, weird state, but I think Sununu bottom line would be favored, but, maybe by 2 instead of the 4 I would have originally said. Now, I'm switching one of my calls here. For, I think, 3 months I've had Wisconsin as tilt I'm moving it back to tilt Republican, and I think, for this reason, and I'm not saying that Ron Johnson could lose, because he absolutely could lose, but he's still someone that I think is favored, because when he runs for re-election, I think that he's going to be running more moderate than he is right now. Right now, he has branded himself as a very, very a very conservative person, and that's not how, and that could help him in the rural areas. Although I don't think that's just a good strategy because Trump's not on the ballot for a couple reasons. But I think that his path to victory runs through the WOW counties. These are the ex-urban counties of Milwaukee, and they have a massive population. I think you can make essentially, there are over 1 million people live in the WOW counties. I'll put it that way. And in Wisconsin, Donald Trump ran behind Mitt Romney in the WOW counties, but he did better in rural areas. That's why he did better. But he would have won Wisconsin by a likely margin in 2016 if he'd gotten, Romney or McCain numbers in the WOW counties. Because the WOW counties have been, for a long time, the most conservative part of the state, and they've been shifting to the left. But that doesn't mean that Ron Johnson can do a little better than Trump there. Now, on the other hand, I think Democrats like Sarah Godlewski have not been doing as well as I think they should. So Godlewski I was originally very bullish on her, but her fundraising numbers have been not great. This could change. Fundraising isn't everything, as we saw with Jamie Harrison. But Godlewski is someone who I was kind of expecting, I guess, more fundraising from her. She hasn't really done that. Her campaign also hasn't been great. I mean, it's kind of been I'm not Ron Johnson instead of talking about a populist plan that would help her in Wisconsin. So that's why I think that she would lose this race. This is still the closest race, though. In my opinion, that hasn't changed. I do think that it would be decided by under a point either way, because this is a ridiculously close state. But Wisconsin, I think Sarah Godlewski could be the Democratic nominee. It could also be Mandela Barnes, who's the lieutenant governor, who I think would also be favored to lose, but Godlewski and Barnes are both above average candidates for Democrats. So that'll be it for this video. 50-50 tie. No gains. The Republicans gain New Hampshire, the Democrats gain Pennsylvania. That's all the changes in this. So thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please do leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.